Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey, Dad, have you ever wondered how you can raise kids who, when they turn into the teenagers you look forward to them turning into, they are not selfish, entitled brats?
Oh, man. Way to open.
We are going to talk today about part 5 in our survival gear series, 7 tools every dad needs for his journey toward godly fatherhood. We're going to talk about part 5 today. And I think, kidding aside, it is one of the ingredients that we can pour into the lives of our children that, if God blesses it, just might take root and help them to be others-focused, generous, giving kids, as opposed to this kind of classic, stereotypical teenager we think about. So today we're going to talk about serving others. The godly dad learns, among other things, how to serve others and how to teach his family how to do that. Before we dive in, I'd like to tell you about our friends at Range Leather. And this is the first show we've had a chance to record, I think, Lawson, since I physically went to the Range headquarters in Laramie, Wyoming.
Oh,
I've
nice.
been there.
That's fantastic.
The building exists. Kyle Koster actually is a real human being.
It looks like the coolest place.
It is actually one of the coolest places. They have retail, they have assembly and manufacturing, and Kyle just does a great job. Like, it looks like Apple and Williams-Sonoma had a baby. Like, it's such a fantastic place. Like, oh my goodness, I was geeking out. He's building on. But here's what you need to know, Dad. What you need to know, Dad, is Range Leather makes great stuff. I now have a really swanky Range Leather Apple Watch band for my Apple Watch, and I love it. It is super cool. And go there. Look for presents for your wife. Look for presents for your children. Go get you something, Dad. This cool new valet tray that we were one of the very, very first customers of ever. We sent out several to some of our friends and donors, and it is amazing. I've gotten endless texts about how great it is. Go check out Range Leather. And if you go to rangeleather.com, you can order something and get 15% off if you use the coupon code MJ15. That stands for Manhood Journey 15. Manhood Journey MJ15 is your coupon code. Go to rangeleather.com. Lawson, let's talk about serving others.
You went into your radio voice.
I did. I love doing that. I mean,
I know you switch. Sometimes you switch when you start getting in that mode. That's funny. All right. So serving others. I agree. I love the way you said it's an ingredient that we can pour into our kids, which also I think means that we ought to do it ourselves as well, not just instruct our children to go serve. Galatians 5 verse 13 says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love." And that's kind of, I think, the foundation scripture for some of what we're talking about today. And, there's a saying, Confucius said, if you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else. And I believe that is like in our DNA, implanted by God into our DNA, that when we help someone else, we are fulfilled, and we feel God's spirit in us when we do something selflessly for another person. I think he loves and rewards that.
Yeah. Just today, there was a really small way I could serve somebody, and it was to send some thank you notes to some people who helped me a week and a half ago. Really simple. Took me 10 minutes, and I felt really great after I did it. You know what I mean? It was one of those like small things, simple thing. but I know it's going to land, with somebody who probably doesn't get thanked all that often. And it was an honor for me to do that. So in really small ways we can serve, and then in really big ways we can serve. We can go on mission trips. We can serve on boards or committees. We have several guys on our Manhood Journey ministry board who serve our ministry with their time, their energy, their expertise, their feedback, their counsel, their wisdom, their money, their connections. Like there's this long list of ways that our 7 board members serve our ministry. And as a dad, what we've said through this whole series, right, is a number of these things we try to impart to our children, we try to teach our children, but way more is caught than taught. And if we are actively serving other people, and if we have a servant's mindset, a posture of service, our kids are going to pick up on that. I was telling somebody recently, our ministry, Manhood Journey, has always existed in what I would call a state of being cash constrained, not poor, not cash. It's not that we have none. We've been cash constrained, but we've been relationship rich. And like you, Lawson, you've been a key relationship. Hunter has been a key relationship. Some of our board, our donors, our volunteers, our writers, our graphic designers, we have tons of people that have come to us and helped the ministry get up on its feet. And I get a tremendous amount of joy out of connecting those dots, out of taking my relationship Rolodex that God's been really gracious to me and allowing me to meet some super cool people and connecting those dots and finding a guy who, has thing A and a guy who needs thing A and smashing them together. That for me is a blast. And it's a simple way that I can serve other people. It doesn't take much, just a little bit of paying attention and hardly any time. How are some ways, Lawson, you're a guy who has served us, Manhood Journey, for, now about a decade. I don't think you'd mind me saying you've been a faithful giver to our ministry over the years, one of the earliest. And I can remember being on the back deck of my house and figuring out that, yes, I can hit your credit card for an extra $500. It's an option I have, or a couple buttons I can push, and voila, we get more money. That was an interesting learning early on. But you've been a guy who served. You've served on boards. You've served even in the industry you're in now. You serve in some ways that are not exactly inside your job description. Are there people that you look back on, lessons you learned, guys you tried to model, people who were influential in your journey of learning how to serve other people?
For sure. Larry Brown comes to mind. He's a friend for 2 decades, and you can just feel when you're with him, you watch him do what he does. He talks to people, he's engaging. Little things, I think, that are just become part of the way we interact with other people, I think is indicative of a heart of gratitude and a heart for service. I mean, you can see it. You can see it at the grocery store, like people, or any store, or, like I've noticed it before with airline employees. You can tell the person that is genuinely in it, wants to do a good job, is looking out for the customer. In fact, I was at a sales meeting that one of my guys was leading, and he was talking about the way that service, like good service, will differentiate us in the market, and I think that is applicable to what we're talking about today too, because as we model the ultimate giver in Jesus, that is noticeable, that differentiates us, and we are called to be different. And so even within our families, as the dads, as the leaders of our family, it's on us, I think, to be different and to show our children what it looks like to walk the earth with a heart of gratitude and a heart of service, like Larry Brown. I mean, when you're with people like Larry, who he is not, whether he gets something in return or not, his vision, his perspective on people that he interacts with, buying a coffee, leading a meeting, riding down the road together on a sales visit, he's got this screen, like everything passes through a screen of what could I do for this person?
Wow.
And it's wonderful to see. And I think it's something that we can model to our children just when we're out and about. And I'm not talking about just being a friendly neighbor, wanting to chat it up with somebody, but like listening. And you hear something. How many times have you has it meant something to you when something arrives in the mail, let's say, or you're with someone and they remember that something was going on in your life, maybe even 2 months ago. We got a customer, Rod, who Jay is also the other guy that he's a lot like this.
I know other people too. It's not like I only know two people, like a guy named Rod and Jay.
I'm talking about in my customer.
Are we listing who? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the interruption.
Just go ahead. It's all yours. No, really,
right.
You take it. No,
really. No, it's up to you. You take over from here. Jay and Rod, like it can be 2 months since I've seen them, and they immediately start the conversation with, "Hey, how's so and so? What's going on with so and so?"
Wow.
Because they care and they listened and they remembered, or like a gift shows up out of nowhere, and it's something that maybe came up in a conversation, and the person that you were with registered that you said, "Ooh, I like that." So, I like that thing. And they remembered that. Have you experienced where, like, maybe a birthday or Christmas, you open a gift and go, "How did you?" And the person goes, "Well, you said when we were together at so and so, you remember you said." That is a heart of serving that we can do. Anybody can do. Anybody can help someone selflessly. You've got to be intentional, though.
Yeah. In case you're listening to this episode, Dad, and you want an opportunity to serve, the thing that we like the most at Manhood Journey are $10,000 checks. We just love those. And there is occasionally guys who remember. They're so kind. They remember.
You're not supposed to ask for it, dummy. You're supposed to tell some fake story of a donor giving 10 grand.
You remembered my love language. You remembered. It's funny. I think of sometimes about serving it's almost like it has this, A and B version. And the A version is like a big service. Like, I'm going to join this board, or I'm going to go for that mission trip, or something that's pretty heavy lifting from a time standpoint. And those are great. Like, I know tons of guys who've served on elder boards, like I mentioned before, on our own ministry board. I've served on boards. There's ways to do that in the big scheme. But what I find super interesting is like the secondary grouping of ways to serve that are the micro moments of service. So I'll give you like two examples that come to mind. A couple weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. with a group of 8 or 9 guys that kind of like me. They lead some kind of men's or fatherhood type ministry. And we had about a 20-minute walk from our hotel to where we met each day. And one day we're walking, and there's about 6 or 7 of us all kind of walking as a group. And I was walking with a guy named Jeff Zog. Jeff, by the way, leads a podcast called Dad Awesome. Hey, if you're out there, Dad, and you're looking for a second great podcast to listen to, in addition to this one, go listen to Dad Awesome. Jeff is amazing. He interviews really cool people. I love Jeff. I only recently met him. But as we're walking, one of the guys in our group, a guy named Dean, who was on a phone call, kind of started going up a sidewalk, and we needed to veer off to the left. So Jeff and I were talking, and we're in the midst of talking, and we start to go toward the left, and Jeff notices that Dean's not quite dialed in. And so he's like, "Hey, wait, we're losing Dean." Like, just as we split off, we were 4 or 5 feet inside this parking lot, and Jeff noticed that one of our guys was wandering off. He wasn't really. He was going up to the block and was going to turn left. We were all on the same page, didn't know it, but I just thought that's really interesting. Here's a guy who's walking from point A to point B, and he sees as part of his job to help everybody get there. It's unstated, unspoken. And I was distracting him with a conversation. Like, it wasn't like he was just, doing nothing. And those little micro moments, I get a text almost every week, at least every 2 weeks, from a friend of mine who hails from Colombia, now lives in America, named Octavio. And Octavio sends me a text for about 1.5 years now, almost every week, with a short prayer for me, and almost always includes a scripture in the text. It's like 5 sentences. It's a sentence of scripture. It's a 2-sentence prayer. And the prayer is not generic, like, "Dear Lord, bless Kent and make him awesome." It's something specific that I've shared with him over the last 1.5 years, and he prays for me regularly. there are these things we can do to serve other people that really don't take a lot of time, a lot of effort. Maybe they take no money at all, but these micro moments where we can serve people, they start with a mental posture, of wanting to serve other people. And you put a scripture in our notes today, Philippians 2. I want you to share that scripture because it directly correlates to what we're talking about.
What's going on, dads? Check this out. Hey, in the world of fatherhood, balancing style and functionality is key, right? Range Leather gets it. Offering products like the sleek Elbert wallet and the American flag hat, it's perfect for dads on the move. Made from the finest Horween leather, Range's products don't just look good, they are built to accompany you through every dad duty with elegance and resilience. Snag your next dad essential at rangeleather.com and save 15% when you use code MJ15 at checkout. Head to rangeleather.com to get your swag. That's RANGE leather.com. I want to set Philippians up with what is in the booklet. It says, we found most dads tend to serve from one of three basic places in their heart. They serve from duty, devotion, or delight. Goes on to say, when we serve out of duty, we're doing it begrudgingly. It's like something you have to do. When we're serving from a place of devotion, we're serving because we care about the other person. And we do it, in that case, we do it because we're choosing to do that. We want to. And then when we serve from a heart of delight, we're actually looking forward to it. Like we get to do it. And so Philippians 2 says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind, and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. And so in the context of duty, devotion, or delight, when we live out that Philippians 2 scripture, we're doing it from, I think, a combination of being devoted and having a heart of delight. We choose to do it, and we know in our heart that we get to do it. We've got something to share, something that is worthy, something that's super valuable, and we want to give that, out of a heart of devotion, and knowing that in that we receive, delight. We get delighted by doing that. We experience joy.
It's interesting. I had a friend. Well, I still have a friend, but I'm talking about what happened to us in the past. A friend I've had for over 35 years. We were friends in high school. We've stayed in touch. He went on to have a really successful Major League Baseball career. And along with that, had some pretty good years economically, right? It was not a bad deal in terms of the income that.
I wondered how you met him. I didn't know you've known him for 35 years. Wow.
Yeah, high school. So hey, if you're out there listening, Paul Bird, you're the man. Love you.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But here's what's interesting: when he was running hot in his pro career, he didn't have tons of time. Because he's got traveling all the time and they have very few moments at home in a decade plus, maybe 12, 13 year pro career. He and his wife moved a lot. So just, that wasn't a season where we could hang out a lot together. However, I helped with an event that he was part of. And after the event, he pulls me aside and says, hey, I want you and April to come to a game on my nickel. Wherever y'all want to go, I will get you tickets and I will put you up and I will cover all of your expenses. And here's what's really funny is I said, because I had just helped with this event. So there was a moment where we had connected and I said to him, oh, Paul, you don't have to do that. And notice my language, right? I was like, you don't have to do that. And he just laughed and goes, yeah, I know. That's what makes it fun. And as you're talking about duty, devotion, and delight. And so I told him, I said, hey, my wife loves the beach. He goes, great. We play the Rays, come down to Tampa. And so we went down, he paid for everything, it just is a giving guy looking for ways to help. And I think really he considered it, and does still consider it, a joy, a delight to serve other people, with whatever resource he might have, whether that's time or money or expertise or whatever. There's a guy who listens to our podcast, Andrew Leonards. Yo, Andrew, how are you?
Yep.
And he has been serving us by connecting with guys on Facebook for probably 2 years now, year and a half. Early podcast listener, and has been a source of great encouragement, and has just dove in with his time, his energy, his winsome personality, his attention to detail. He's great, and so like there are so many ways.
Hang on, I'm looking up winsome.
It starts with a W. Can I help you? Do you need some help? Can you even find it?
Look at Andrew being winsome.
Look at Andrew being all winsome and such. I think what's interesting is the gap for most of us as dads is back to what you said, Lawson. Is it duty? Is it devotion? Or is it delight? Have we gotten to that place where serving other people actually fills our tank? It doesn't drain it. Because we know we're serving, and because, as Philippians 2 says, if any encouragement from being united with Christ, so this idea of having a servant mindset springs forth. The well we're drawing from is that we should be encouraged because we are united with Christ. That fact alone should make us bent toward service.
And talking about our children, it isn't necessarily, in many cases, going to just be a natural thing that kids just evolve into this, naturally giving person. And so we can help teach some of that. We can teach empathy. We can teach gratitude. We can remind them and talk about things in our lives that have been a blessing in our families. And then therefore, how does that tie into them going to school or being on the ball team or going to dance class or going to a dance recital and keeping an eye out? We've had a little saying among our family of look for the overlooked. And
nice.
What that means is keep your eye peeled, because there are people in the world that everyone is overlooking, and they feel less important and they feel forgotten. And so, we can talk about things like that with our children, so that when they're in school and they see the person sitting alone day after day in the lunchroom, they can put themselves out there and maybe walk over and say, hey, can I sit with you? They can see somebody struggling, in a dance recital or something. They've lost something that's critical to the costume and they're freaking out, and,
wardrobe malfunction.
And your daughter goes over and helps her search through her bag and finds it, and, makes that person feel better. And then so now we dads notice those things, pull them aside and talk about it and go a little deeper into, hey, son, why'd you do that? I saw what you did. That was fantastic. What made you do that? Get them to talk about it. Get them to recognize and feel the reward. I've also heard a family. If you had said this is something that you and April do, I wouldn't have been surprised. But they have a kindness jar where each family member writes down like an act they've performed, or that they saw their brother or their sister or their mother perform, and they put that little note in the kindness jar, and then periodically you pull it out and reflect on those things. And I think that's just kind of, I imagine that being, it's not something we did as a family. I wish we had thought about it, but to like have a dinner conversation, everybody puts their phones away and sits down for dinner, and you pull out the kindness jar and start reflecting back on some things your kids did. And that it builds the reward. It helps them absorb, from teaching, from your guidance, and you calling it out and giving some recognition, that builds it in. It's not going to have to be sustained for the rest of their life. I'm talking about you get it going, and then they begin to recognize and want to do it themselves, just kind of evolve naturally. You know what I mean?
Well, I can't remember who said it, but what gets rewarded gets repeated. And that's what you're alluding to, is the idea. That's not an original Kent statement, but what gets rewarded gets repeated. And it's the idea that, to your point, if we do notice our kid noticing the marginalized person, or like when my boys would go to the bench in a sports situation and they would continue to cheer for the who's left on the field or on the basketball court. Those kind of moments, as a dad, I really want to reward that. If nothing else, with some verbal kind of affirmation or a wink or a head nod or I see what you did there. I want to lean into those moments because I want them to know, man, I'm going to probably miss a lot of these, but I didn't miss that one. I noticed you doing that. Right. Two other quick comments, Lawson, and then maybe you can give dads some practical ways they can learn to serve better. One is, you alluded to something a minute ago when you said taking your cell phones and putting them away and having a dinner. One of the ways that you can serve people the best and, frankly, be a standout, superb, different than the culture kind of person is to listen to somebody well. Because in our modern era, I'm on round 3 of giving my Apple Watch a try to see if it's a valuable tool for me or if it is a distraction for me. Because often when I'm with other people who have their Apple Watch on, I want to throw my coffee on them during our coffee because they spend in a 1-hour meeting, they may look at their phone 47 times and be responding to texts, then going, and they're not listening. I know they're not listening. And so for us, can we listen with our mind, our eyes, our ears, our souls, our presence, our body, our posture? Can we listen to those around us? And it might mean we need to remove some technical distractions. And then secondly, I want to mention before we get off, because one of the people in my life who serves the most people the most often is my wife, April. And actually, what's funny is the guy producing this podcast is the less than 72 hour ago recipient of a couple of dinners in a giant cardboard box because he wasn't feeling well. And as my wife, who also, frankly, wasn't feeling super great, as she made our family dinner 2 nights ago, she made extra, put it in a pot, surrounded it with a bunch of this bread and these crackers and this thank you note, and sent me on the Uber. I was the Uber driver and I delivered the food to our podcast producer who lives 15 minutes away. I was just the driver. She's the servant. And that lady serves people nonstop. If you spent a month or 6 months or a year hanging around with April, you would become a better servant by osmosis. Like you'd have to, whether it's her praying for somebody, her writing a thank you note, her sending food. I couldn't count in 29 years of marriage. I could not count the number of people she has sent a meal or an encouraging note to. It's so many. And for us, that sets a tone. That sets a tone in our home, sets a tone with me, sets a tone with our boys. And they kind of have to learn it. It's like, how could you be around it and not pick some of it up? And our boys have, to a large measure, they really have. So kudos, shout out to my wife, April, who is.
Yeah, you got that right. She's so inspiring. I think there's some real easy, practical ways that, besides, there are some, I think, obvious ones, like the Scouts do a great job of, helping learn to do things for others. And they have the reward system and the merit badges and the, badges and stuff like that. There are other groups within school systems and within community systems that do that. So, you can look around and see what interests your kid and maybe go do that with them. You can volunteer at the church. There's always something going on. Every church always needs an extra hand, without a doubt, and go model that and take your kid with you. It doesn't have to be, a long, drawn out all day kind of thing. It can be running a quick errand for someone. I've got a friend, Lance, who, when their 2 boys were young, they would go to the hospital and just walk through and say hey to older people that didn't have family. And I forget how he did it, you can't just walk into a hospital and start walking down the hallways. But there was, maybe it was a part of a program. You can
if you wear scrubs and pretend to be a doctor. Right. That's not illegal or anything.
Get a stethoscope and just act like you know what you're doing.
Pick up a chart occasionally. Just pick
Start
up a chart,
checking on
read it.
people. Oh, you're good. You can get out of here. You can go.
Or better yet, you pick up a chart and just start shaking your head and walk off. And they're like, "What's happening?" Don't do that, Dad. Do not do that.
That's funny.
Oh, if you do, videotape it. If you do,
right, send it in.
Don't do that.
But I say that because I remember how much it meant to those elderly people.
Yeah.
To see kids. I mean, they would just light their whole day up. They're in pain or just lonely and isolated. So, and then get back in the car and talk about it. Think through and give it some additional encouragement. But you can also just, like have, I know another guy that's got like a case of water bottles in his back seat at all times. And if he's driving down the road, stops at a red light and a homeless guy, starts walking up asking for money, clearly they are asking for money, but he'll just reach in the back seat and hand him a water. Now, sometimes he's had that water thrown back at him because, the guy gets mad and wants money or whatever. But many times, the person has like a bottle of water, man, out there standing in the hot sun.
Yeah.
And then his kids started keeping an eye out. And so they would look forward to being at a red light and see a homeless person.
Wow. It had moved to delight. Like it had moved to delight.
That's right. And that came from doing, from the act of doing it. So, look, I guess I would boil it down to this. And I'm by no means am I some expert that's got this nailed. April is someone who does this better than most of us. But it takes thought, maybe some prep. Give it, a conversation between yourself and your wife, and then be intentional about it. Go out of your way a little bit, and it becomes something that you begin to look forward to. Like my buddy's kids, when they would see a homeless guy at a red light, they were like yelling. They were excited. Like, but you get into it, do it.
Dad, we hope today, as we've talked about serving others, has been a fun set of examples. We've told you a bunch of stories. Go do it, man. Serve other people. Your kids are going to pick up on that. Serve your wife, serve your children. Let them have, the last cookie, the best seat for the movie, the extra bowl of popcorn.
There you go.
Some easy wins, man.
Right.
Low hanging fruit in your own house. You don't have to always get your way. They can go first. Let your kids see a heart of service, because after all, Jesus did say, "I did not come to be served, but I came to serve." So we're modeling Christ for our families when we serve both inside our home and outside our home. Let's serve in deed. Let's serve in word. Let's serve in spirit. Go do it, Dad. And then join us next week for part 6 of our survival gear series, where we will talk about stewarding our resources. We will talk to you next week. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.